Hey all, thanks for joining in to a panel that all of us authors are absolutely going to hate. It's 10 mistakes that make your editors cringe. I have some pretty awesome editors with me. Ladies, why don't you tell me and the people about yourselves and your editorial badassery. Heidi.
All right, I'm Heidi Angel, and I am an author and an editor, and I'm also a grammar Nazi, which is why that whole process works. I know it hurts, right? I'm not the only one, but I'm the kind of person who I find mistakes in traditionally published work, and take deep breaths and then keep reading. So it just made sense for me to offer my editorial skills to others as well, so that they didn't end up being those traditionally published books with mistakes.
Awesome. Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Hannum. I'm a developmental editor and writing coach, and I freelance with a few indie publishers out of the Bay Area in California, and have also had the pleasure of working with a few self-published authors.
Awesome. Maura.
My name is Maura Vanderlinden. I am both a published technical and fiction author, and I'm a technical and fiction editor. I do a lot of freelance editing, both, again, technical and fiction. Have worked for small presses. I'm actually co-owner of a press. I'm the annoying person who, takes the Sharpie and puts apostrophes on signs.
Awesome. Well, Maura, tell us your first pet peeve. I'm sure it's going to have something to do with punctuation, so hit us with it.
Actually, no. My first pet peeve is not following submission instructions.
Ooh.
Whether it is using a particular style guide or whether it is how to format things, but when somebody just sends something in and you can tell they never ever looked at what was required or what was asked for.
Straight to the circular file.
Really that bad, huh? Just delete.
Depending on who you're editing for. If it's a freelance client, Of course you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But if you're editing for a house or from like my press and somebody's obviously never even read or tried to follow the style guide, that tells me you don't have attention to detail and you can't follow the rules. So
yeah.
For freelance, any editorial suggestions you make aren't going to get paid attention to either.
Yeah, it's a giant red flag for sure. And like she said, for freelance clients, like you're gonna suck it up and do the formatting yourself. Yeah, and coach them. Like, by the way, paragraphs should be indented. But if it's for a house or a journal, or if you're like submitting for publication, you absolutely have to follow the submission guidelines. Otherwise, they're not even going to pay attention to it.
How many authors would you say percentage fail spectacularly with that one?
Editing small press, when I was doing a lot of that, probably 75%.
Ouch.
And if I will tell authors, if there is not a style guide to be had and you can't find it out, look for one that's generic to your genre. There's a Sifwa one. There's a good old Strunk and White. Pick one and be loyal to it, because at least then things are consistent and you can say what you did.
Yeah, and if you're writing fiction, Chicago Manual of Style is a good thing to get your hands on, I think.
Yeah, CMOS is good too. It depends on a little bit on which genre, but yeah. Pick something.
Yeah, follow something. Very good. All right, Heidi, hit us.
I'm one of those people that gets really annoyed with editing dialogue.
Okay.
People who correct dialogue that doesn't fit the tone of the character.
Okay.
So, for example, I write my Hunter series takes place in the South, and my characters do a lot of gonna, shoulda, y'all. And it's not like that in the rest of the story. It's just in the dialogue. But people were like, oh, she doesn't know how to spell. And I'm like, you've never been to the South.
It's called a dialect.
Exactly.
Yeah. That can actually be really difficult to get right, the dialect?
Very difficult, yeah.
And you sometimes have to walk the fine line between what is good for the person and their background and what is readable to the audience. I've seen people try and do the infamous one is Scottish or Irish accents or dialogue that at a certain point, if you go too far, people give up trying to read it. And so you have to kind of then Like one of the other panelists, I specialize a lot in new authors, and I do a lot of developmental editing. So that's something that gets kind of stressed a lot is, okay, we want a touch of it, we want personality, we want background, but we don't want it to be Greek.
Yeah,
you still got to be able to read.
At the same time, nobody speaks proper English. And so if you have a character who never uses conjunctions, unless that's intentional, which in the Hunters it is, I do have a character who's very old and she never uses conjunctions.
I actually had an opposite of that, where I called out somebody because the dialogue was way too professorial for what the background of the character was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've experienced that too, where you're like, they would not say "do not" to somebody like they
not in that sense. Yeah. But being able to make the characters, the way the characters speak, believable.
Yeah,
it's really a trick that editors. It's not our job; it's your story. So you need to be able to figure that out. We can put you in the right direction, but you need to be able to figure out how deeply you want to go, and you need to commit to that or not do it. One or the other.
Very wise. Megan, hit us with one of your pet peeves.
So I guess I could sort of go with the one that's related to that. My pet peeves are, since developmental editing is my specialty, they're more related to that. And so one of my number one pet peeves related to dialogue is actually when writers describe the dialogue instead of just showing a conversation. So like there's a paragraph that's like, he told me such and such information and then I responded this way, and instead of like putting it in actual quotes and letting us see the characters speak for themselves. Because I feel very strongly that you get to know a character so much better when they are talking to you or to the other characters, and when they are, speaking for themselves, basically. So that's my number one dialogue pet peeve right
now.
there.
Let me ask you this on the flip side. There is a lot of dialogue that is just completely inane. Good morning, you can only have that in a book so many times, let's say. So if you say after an exchange of pleasantries kind of thing, like, are there times when it's good?
That's totally different. When you're using it to recap and make it simplified, that's fine. But when you're having a character tell another character what the conversation was that those two characters had 3 days ago, that's just annoying.
That's annoying. Or if it's like not even in dialogue at all, it's just like a straight paragraph of you're describing a conversation that's happening, but none of it is in dialogue. Like that is a big no on my list.
let me ask you this. I just had it in my brain. When a character is sort of running down a whole big plan that they've, whether it's been thought, in internal monologue or they've been dialoguing it with someone else, and then let's say they tell it to the whole party. You could basically just sum it up by saying he explained the plan, and because the reader was there for the conception, you wouldn't need to give that part, right?
Absolutely. Okay.
Usually correct, yeah.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to make sure I had that right. I don't do that in my books, but just in case I ever did.
Yeah, you don't need to repeat information that the reader already has in dialogue just because it does happen in dialogue later. But like I said, if you're describing a conversation that is happening in the scene, just give it to me in a conversation.
Just have the bloody conversation.
Exactly. Let your characters do the talking.
Yeah, that's true. Maura, you're next.
I think the next one, although my internet is doing weird things, so forgive me. The next one on my list is probably, if we go back to developmental editing, is sort of the Mary Sue phenomenon where things don't have a price. So people haven't thought out their world system or how their culture works, or so you'll have people who have these, say, magical skills, but there's no price to using them.
Ah, okay.
So it's sort of, it's a little hard to explain because it's sort of incomplete world development, I guess, is sort of it. And some of those you can gloss around. You can kind of take out the bits that are questionable and just not have to deal with it at all. But if I get a story in the first paragraph, so-and-so went and blasted the whatever, using the power of her mind, and then she's trapped in a warehouse and can't get out.
Yeah. Or the flip side where the powers solve too many problems. I call that the because magic problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just got fixed because magic.
It's often
Also-
PFM, pure fucking magic.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the Brandon Sanderson's 3 Laws of Magic are the perfect guide for every author to follow, because it basically explains the cost versus ability aspect of magic, and then the more a reader understands magic, the more you can use it, the less they explain it, the less you can use it. And then, of course, avoiding the Deus Ex Machina thing where the magic just solves the problem.
Yep.
Those 3 laws of magic.
Something magically. Deus Ex Machina is one of my pet peeves. It's hard to avoid it sometimes, but at the same time, finding the way to make it less Deus Ex.
In magic specifically, or everything?
No, in anything. Like, my son and I were just talking about this with The Walking Dead. And he was like, well, I don't think that the way that Carl survived the situation was Deus Ex Machina. And I was like, really? You don't think that was just, all of a sudden, for no reason, the zombies just went around him? That is exactly the definition of, he didn't hide, he didn't escape. It wasn't because they got distracted by something else that the audience knew about. It was literally the definition of Deus Ex Machina. They just magically went around him, and he was fine.
Yeah.
So that's not, if you give some reason that, okay, it could plausibly have happened that that's the case, then it's a little less Deus Ex. But that's one of my pet peeves, is I need to understand why something happened. And if I don't, I get annoyed. It's lazy writing.
Now let me, along that vein, how do you avoid crossing the line? There are plenty of instances where sheer coincidence or bad luck saves the hero. The villain stumbles over a stone, or something distracts his attention long enough for the hero to do something heroic and win the day. How
Really
do you
easy.
avoid?
You let me know that they're on a rocky outcropping when they're fighting before he trips on the stone. If all of a sudden he just trips and you didn't tell me that they were on a rocky outcropping, if you tell me he's an expert swordsman and he drops his blade, that's very Deus. No, expert swordsmen don't drop their blades. Maybe lose their balance because of the rocky outcropping, but that rocky outcropping is your answer to not being Deus Ex.
But I think, like a few other things in writing, I think this is a place where things that happen in real life don't work as well in fiction.
Mm-hmm.
You can perfectly well have an accident that happened that you lived through that nobody should have lived through, and it happened in real life, and it happened, right? But if you're reading it in the book and it's part of the plot of the book and the especially the heated scenes of a book, it doesn't work that way. Even regardless of the fact that it happens in daily life occasionally, it won't sell. You can't sell it as easily to an author,
especially
to a
if
reader.
it's a key part of the story.
Yeah.
The climax.
Yeah, exactly. If it's
just on the way to the grocery store, he fell and scuffed his shoe or something, whatever, that's not a big thing. But in the massive end fight, then you have a harder time.
Yeah, but I feel like as long as, like was said earlier, if you've established the setting such that it seems like a plausible thing that happens.
Yeah, because then it's not Deus Ex.
Exactly. That's where scene setting and world building and that kind of thing really come in handy. If it's just, out of the blue, that's what makes it Deus Ex. If there's nothing that the reader can point to say that's what caused it.
Now let me ask you this. In The Hobbit, the guy stumbles over the ring, and because he stumbles over the ring, Sauron is ultimately defeated.
That made me so mad!
Is that an element of Deus Ex Machina? Like some small, insignificant thing that the hero literally just stumbles across at some point that saves the day? Is that a form of Deus Ex Machina, or is that just...
I don't think so, because that's the plot of the story. The story doesn't happen if he doesn't find the ring. So I don't think that I would consider that Deus Ex.
But now let's say I'm the hero of my story, right? I'm a farmer, I'm walking, taking care of my sheep, and I find this smooth pebble that's white and beautiful, and I put it in my pocket. And through the course of the story, I become a superhero and I defeat the villain. But because of that stupid stone that I found, I win. is that a form of Deus Ex Machina, or is that just writing?
If it's built into the whole thing, again, I think that that's the plot of your story. And that could actually be really interesting because it seems insignificant, but it becomes the like solution. That I think that just sounds like an interesting plot.
Okay. Good. No, that's good to know, because in my stories, I have tried to avoid things that have just been like coincidences that lead to the hero winning. But there are times when the hero, he has no idea about what's going to get him to the end. And then some piece of information that he gets halfway through the book reveals to him a truth that at the end helps him to defeat the villain. And so I find myself thinking, okay, is that just cheating? Is that a form of Deus Ex Machina, or is this actually how you write?
No, that's story structure. That's how it should go. It's Deus Ex is if in the final confrontation, like it seems like magically everything just goes the hero's way. That's Deus Ex, like with no explanation, no previous like building to that reveal or anything. It just, he's in the middle of the struggle and it just poof is fixed, like that's the
good. Yeah. Good to know I'm doing it right. All right, so Megan, you're up.
All right. I guess related again, we all sort of are playing off of each other. My thing is less the Deus Ex underdevelopment and more underdevelopment of romantic relationships in stories. I cannot stand it when two characters are in love simply because the author said so, and I don't feel like there was any justification for that. Like, when did they even have a conversation that seemed like they were trying to get to know each other at all? And the example of this that came to me while I was writing these down was Harry and Ginny in the Harry Potter series. Like, yes, where did that even come from? Like,
we know why she fell in love with him. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, but then
why did he fall for her?
And was like, oh, she's totally hot. And I'm like, that's what? No.
Yeah. I will say that one genre that unfortunately falls prey to that one a lot is paranormal romance. They have the alpha male werewolf or vampire who
the fated mate thing. Yeah.
That pisses me off so bad.
Yeah. And I feel like it happens a lot too in specifically television and movie adaptations of like fantasy stories, because those books tend to be longer anyway, because they are infusing the like relationship building into the plot, which is usually sprawling and epic. And so when you try to condense it into something like television or movies, then that part is what gets sacrificed. Yeah. And the thing I watched most recently was the Shannara Chronicles, which just like in the last episode, they were like, oh yeah, and I love you, by the way. And I was like, cool, because you've said like 3 words to each other this whole time. So yeah, that's the thing that gets me, is when it feels to me like there's no reason for these characters to be in love other than, oh, I wanted there to be a love story in my book.
That was actually the exact series that came to my mind when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a boy and there's a girl, so they must be in love. Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. All right, Maura, what's your next pet peeve? What do we do that makes you cringe?
I think the next one that came up on my list is dialogue tags. That there are certain dialogue tags, because they are so common, they sort of get ignored as you read. He said, she said, the word said. But I get a lot of new authors who have been told, don't use the same word all the time for this. Think of other words. So you've got a person whispering, drawling, saying all these different dialogue tags for no good reason. You don't even half the time need a dialogue tag. If you've got the dialogue and every once in a while you remind people who's talking, you don't really have to tag every piece of dialogue. Yeah. But you'll go through this gamut of, thesaurus R us for dialogue tags, and there needs to be a reason. If somebody's whispering, there should be a reason. If somebody is yelling or drawling or, genuflecting, there should be a reason. So that was one I was editing the other day.
Unless I need to know how they are saying a thing, like you said, for a reason, I don't want to know. Like, just give me what they're saying.
Give me what they're saying, and every once in a while remind me who it is. So.
Yeah. Like, unless I need to know that they are saying it angrily or like they're expressing some emotion while saying this dialogue, I don't need the fancy tag.
And the truth is that
a lot of time that can be told with the punctuation that you use.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to add a tag.
Or even
don't
with what the character does. You know, like he slams his fist on the table. You know, he's not laughing or weeping.
Right.
He's going to be yelling. If he flings himself to his feet and paces the room, you know he's like the actions that go with the words tells you what they're doing.
Yep.
Agreed.
All right, Heidi.
I get annoyed when authors use lots of big words that they clearly don't truly understand.
Oh yes. Thank you. I have an example, but it's not R-rated.
Words. So like one of my big pet peeves, I just moved to Utah about 3 years ago, and I've done some editing for a couple of authors out here. And it got so bad where it got to the point where I actually had to question some people to make sure that it wasn't just a cultural thing that I was missing. But when you do this with your fists, it's called what?
Clenching.
Clenching. Thank you. Yes. And when you have a deal, you clinch it. Right? But in Utah, you can clinch your fists, and they don't even do deals, apparently. Because they didn't even know what clinching was, other than in relation to your fists. And I was like, no, it's clench, C-L-E-N-C-H, clench.
Another one, exercised. You exercise demons, but they spell it with an E.
Oh, there's an O in that word.
I know.
Unless the demon's on a treadmill.
Yeah.
There you go. Exercise that demon. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, and I get frustrated because the flip side is a lot of authors, because they aren't very well, they're not verbose, like some people, that they will cheat and they'll just take all the big words out because Stephen King said, keep it simple. And I'm like, yeah, only if you're stupid.
Ernest Hemingway says
stupid, but but you do want to be careful about making sure that the word that you're using actually means what you think it means, and not just, oh, that's a really big word, that's a synonym for the word that I was going to use. Yeah, your editor knows this, and so do well-read readers.
Yeah. We'll be able to tell if you're writing with the thesaurus next to you.
Yep.
And if you're using very specific terminology, be sure you understand if it's the correct terminology.
That too. That too. Do your research.
Using jargon. Ooh.
Yeah.
I've been in the software industry for a long time and used to do a lot of stuff in the security space. So anybody who's writing hacking stories and stuff, I cringe every time. It doesn't work that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
You mean it's not like in the movie where there's all those cool, pretty things for hacker? And you just kind of, and it just magically appears like that.
And they don't even all live in their parents' garage either. So
yeah.
All right, Megan.
Okay, so my next one is sort of crutch phrases that also seem lazy to me. Things like almost or somehow, like it was almost magical. Why wasn't it just magical? Or if it wasn't magical, what was it? Like that kind of thing. Or I got over it somehow. How did you get over it though? Like
it's you should know.
Exactly. So those types of things just seem, like I said, kind of lazy. Like the writer didn't want to push themselves to actually figure out how the character did the thing or what it actually looked like. Find the word that you're looking for. And then another phrase that has been getting to me recently is thought to myself, which drives me a little insane because who else are you going to think to? Literally.
Well, if you have telepaths.
There you go.
Exactly. Unless you're telepathic, like you don't need to clarify that you're not thinking to someone else. So that's just one thing that's been every time I see it, and it's everywhere, and people say it in conversation, and I'm just like, okay.
Let me ask you this. I know something is going to be right up there with somehow. Now, this is actually something that I've dealt with in my books. Is this character that I'm writing? He has a form of amnesia, let's say. So he sees something and he recognizes it, but he doesn't know how. So he'll say somehow it was familiar, and then he'll go on to think, like he'll try to reason it out to figure out why it's familiar. Good or bad?
good because he has amnesia.
Okay.
Or you could say, it seemed familiar, right? If you have too many somehows, you can kind of...
Right. I mean, you do mix it up. But I'm actually reading your book right now, and you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
I don't feel bad about that at all.
I know I was going to say none of you are allowed to read my book because, you guys will grammar Nazi the shit out of it.
Too late.
All right, so we've got time for one more. Who's got a heavy hitter for us?
Oh, okay. I'm going to take it.
All right.
Be sure when you use modifiers, you know what you are modifying. So my favorite example of this is if you've heard, do you remember the Amanda Knox trials and stuff? I kept hearing on the radio Amanda Knox's former Italian boyfriend. He's not formerly Italian. He is an Italian former boyfriend.
Okay.
So when you use modifiers, be sure you look at what you are actually modifying.
Gotta go close to what they're modifying.
Yes, they need to be good neighbors with what they're modifying and not separated. So
dangling off a cliff modifiers will get you every time.
That came up in some New York book I was reading the other day, and I'm like, okay, put the book down, go get some coffee. Say, glad that's not my editor. Okay.
Do a little meditating.
There is sort of a caveat, a 10B to that one, where it's sometimes you have to put a long sentence together. Like this character, the one who had told him this, said to go with the guy who had done that. Like how do you build those super long sentences correctly?
Well, first of all, do they need to be the super long sentence? But if they have to be, that's where punctuation helps you out a lot.
Yes. Parentheses, comma, dashes.
Well, say I'm very anti-parentheses in fiction. I don't think parentheses are asides, and I don't think asides when you're in the head of point of view thing actually have any place. But that's a religious war among editors. But definitely M dashes. Look at what they really do. Commas. That one sounded like commas. I don't like to have to look at it spelled.
Yeah, that one would be
and use your punctuation and use it well.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
But the first thing is always question if it's not long, why.
Yeah, but you know what? That's why one of Stephen King's rules is just to keep it simple, stupid. Because if you have simple sentences, you're gonna run into so many less problems. And for first starting out writers, I would say, keep it simple. Yep. And then build on it from there.
Yep.
Because
I am a long sentence destroyer.
Yeah, because long sentences are complicated, and most of the time they're really not necessary. It's just because the writer was too lazy to figure out how to break it into two sentences.
And more words in a sentence does not make it sound better.
No. And if you're ever trying to read your work or you're having an audiobook done, they will curse you if they're hugely long anyway. Even if they're grammatically correct.
I like it. All right, well, we've got a few minutes left, so I guess this is going to be 12 things that make your editor cringe. Heidi, hit us with another one.
I get annoyed with who and that when you're saying Bob that did blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yes.
Bob did not do that. And, it drives me crazy because I see this in professionally edited books, or since Scott Card had a book that came out, and he did it all through the book, and I'm like, how is this even possible? I mean, it's not even like a professionally edited. It's like he's one of the highest grossing authors in his genre. How did this happen? Who dropped the ball?
Well, you know how it happens? It happens when somebody gets so big that the editor is afraid to stand up for the editing.
Oh, is that what happened?
Because
slap that editor.
as an example, and I'll be fairly unpopular, Harry Potter 5.
Oh, yeah.
Potter 5, you could tell when the person became afraid to edit. Because it suddenly got weirdly bloated.
I was going to say, is that why they're like increasingly like ginormous?
Yes, and that's why, because they get afraid.
Because there were a lot more errors in the last books. That made me really sad.
And you can tell exactly in that series where it happened.
And it is a shame too. Like editors, like you make your writers look bad if you're afraid to stand up to them. So yeah.
Interesting. All right, Megan, for the last one.
Okay, my last one is it's story/character related again, and it's books with female leads or primarily female like casts of characters that don't pass the Bechdel test.
Ooh.
That drives me insane. Like if your two main characters are women, like, and the Bechdel test, if you're not familiar, is two female characters having a conversation with each other that's not about men. And like that's not a terribly hard test to pass. So if you have a 300-page novel and your two main characters are female, or you have two female characters, like you just come on, like one conversation.
That's no, actually, that I was actually thinking about this the other day. I'm writing a female lead character. I mean, a story, fantasy novel, but the whole story is about this girl sold to a thieves guild, and it's all men basically. There's like three other women in the guild, and because of her status as an apprentice and learning, she never actually interacts with any other women. Now, is that bad, or is that correct because it's done on purpose? Or what would you, if you were my editor, what would you tell me?
It might be fine because of the world that you've built, but depending on the length of your story, I would find it really difficult to believe that she didn't have one interaction with, like, if there are other females around her, I would find it difficult to believe, depending on the circumstances, that they wouldn't have some minor interaction at the very least.
Well, okay, I'll give you a quick rundown. Sorry to the other, you guys can also chip in on this. Tell me if I'm doing this right or wrong. So this girl, she's sold to a thieves guild at the age of 8. She's put in a class between 8 and 18, 10 years of basic slavery, essentially. And all the other kids in her class, so to speak, are males. The teachers are males. There are a few other females in the entire guild, but because she's very focused in her class, there's no interaction with other females outside of it.
So then why is she the only female in her class?
Because she was sold to them. Her father sold her in payment of debts.
How big is her class, though? Like, why did no one else sell a daughter to this particular
There's 12
or something?
12 people.
I might buy it. I might push back a little, but if that's the way that your story's going to go, then I don't want, because like we said earlier, editors, it's your story. It's not our job to mess with that too much, but I would do exactly like I'm doing right now and just question you on it, just to see if you wouldn't have a moment of, maybe it would be better if,
I would definitely question why, if she's the only girl in the class, why haven't other girls been sold? And is she the only girl who's ever been schooled by this guild? And if she's not, where did the other women go? And what about housekeeping staff and whatever? Because I sincerely doubt that they probably do their own laundry.
They have all the apprentices do all that stuff, the scut work.
It's nice until you find out nobody can cook. So,
I would say that another creative way to get around that, especially when you're writing fantastical fiction, where it does tend to be a more patriarchal society, is if the father sold his daughter, not letting them know she was a girl. So he gave them the daughter, pretending it was a boy, because they only take boys, and then, or really exceptional women, which would explain why you have a couple of other women who were in the guild.
And maybe they branded her or marked her as a member of the guild, and now they can't get rid of her without fulfilling their...
And dad took off, so they can't go back to recollect the debt, so they're making the best with what they've got.
Interesting.
And that seems like a very realistic approach.
Interesting. You've given me a lot of...
That is a good fix.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Developmental work.
Awesome. I'm now gonna write that down to rework my whole book. Thank you.
Give Heidi credit.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys so much for helping us authors improve. Super appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes, that's definitely fun.